All right, let's move on to the NBA Finals. NBA Finals tip-off is tomorrow between the San Antonio Spurs and the New York Knicks. New York Knicks and Spurs, they played against each other in the 1999 NBA Finals. And, I was asked yesterday where I was in 1999, and I was -1. I wasn't even a thought. And, you guys are younger than me, so I won't even ask where you guys were in 1999. But I think this is kind of, it mirrors what we saw in 99 in terms of the Spurs run. You had the Spurs in Tim Duncan in his first, I believe it was first playoff run in 99, go into New York and win that series. And then Wembanyama going into this year, going that same path, right? I think both teams did play Portland and Minnesota and on their way to the finals, and then played the Knicks in the NBA Finals. But regardless of that, I want to start with kind of breaking down what got both teams here. And let's start with the Knicks, right? The Knicks, they have only lost 2 games this entire playoff runs. They started off in their first round 4-2, a series win over the Atlanta Hawks. And then we got a sweep of the Philadelphia 76ers, which I thought that was completely unfair. And then the sweep of the Cleveland Cavaliers, 4-0 series win against them. They've won, I believe, 11 games in a row. I think that's how many. Yeah, because they were down 2-1 in the Atlanta series, if I'm not mistaken. And now they've continued to win. And let's point out like one key that the Knicks have been really good at. And I'll start. I think the Knicks 3-point shooting has been exceptional in these playoffs. I think that when you look at the margin of victory that the Knicks have put on teams over these last couple of years, or last couple of series, I should say, they have blown teams out through their 3-point shooting. I think Landry Shamet and Mikal Bridges and Jalen Brunson, all of these guys, Josh Hart, they're providing some amazing 3-point shooting to kind of extend leads. And then they're using, their back-end defense to kind of stop teams from coming back. And you saw Cleveland really, besides game 1, never got a groove for this series. And I think that's what I really like about what the Knicks have done. They've improved their 3-point shooting from series to series. And that's why they haven't lost in 10-plus games, right? Daniel, what do you think has been the best attribute for the Knicks?
I think, me personally, I think it's not only just been shooting, but just how they've managed their games so far, and how
Yeah.
they'll probably continue to manage their games this final series. Because I think this team is a very peaky team. I feel like if they don't get going, it's gonna be slow. Like it's just not gonna be the greatest basketball out there. But if that shooting does get going and that shooting gets hot, there's kind of no stopping that team. Because you saw with the Cavs and both the Sixers, just the way they were able to just go on hot streaks and just get out to these really big leads. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's something that San Antonio really hasn't seen. They saw it a little bit with OKC, but I don't think it's nearly similar to what this Knicks team can do.
Yeah. Sergio?
Jalen Brunson. That's the main thing that's been, obviously
Yes.
all these other players are, propelling the team up, but Jalen Brunson going off for 40 plus points, almost every night. It helps a lot. And then, the cat experiment has worked so far. I know there are a lot of questions about how he would fit on that team.
The
And
big bodega.
yeah, yeah. But his chemistry with Jalen Brunson is what's working, and they do all the little things on defense. OG Anunoby and Josh Hart and all those guys, like they get back there and they don't let up. So,
Yeah.
but the main thing for me is
I didn't even
Jalen
listen.
Brunson for
Oh,
sure.
gee, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jalen Brunson. I mean, insane. I thought that he's been the second best player in these playoffs, only behind his opponent, which we'll talk about in a second. But Jalen Brunson has been magical in this playoff run. I think that he's kind of solidified himself in the top 10 players of the NBA. And I think that the New York Knicks, with Mike Brown, former Kings player, which there's a lot of Kings players that are Kings coach. There's a lot of Kings staff and players that are heading into the finals these last 2 years. That just adds to their dread, right? But we won't talk about that for the sake of Kings fans. Yeah, Mike Brown, I think, has his team playing really well. And I think for his legacy, I think if he were to win the NBA championship, I think that kind of changes the narrative around Mike Brown. You know, this guy's been around the league for a long time, hasn't really reached the heights of the teams that he's coached. And I think that he finally, in this playoff run, can finally get something done and win the championship, especially for a team that hasn't won a championship in such a long time. If he were to come to New York and win a championship, I think that just puts a notch in his career that you can rarely see from other coaches or staff members. On the Spurs side of things, I think what I've really liked about this team, the perimeter defense by guys like Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, Dylan Harper, Julian Champagnie. Like, these guys have been locked down on the perimeter. And you saw that besides Game 7, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was not really effective to the heights that he was in the regular season. And that is because he was getting guarded by these amazing perimeter defenders. And maybe they are allowed to be a little bit more aggressive because they have a Victor Wembanyama back there. And I think that is a part to it. But I also think it is a skill in of itself for a guy like Stephon Castle to defend as well as he did in that series. And I think that if the Spurs are going to win this series, they're going to have to match that intensity that they did in that series against SGA and match that against Jalen Brunson in this series. Daniel, what have you liked about the Spurs in this playoff run so far?
I think for me, it's just been consistency overall. I think Game 7 was, to me, I didn't expect Game 7 to go the way it did, to be honest. I thought it was going to be more, how we'd seen that whole series go. One team just blows out another. And I was fully expecting that again. But I feel like Game 7 was what the Spurs' real team was, in a sense, and not those, 3 games that they were blown out in. And just, in general, I loved how Champagnie's streak on that Game 7 was crazy. The way he was
look
able
up
to
what he
pull
had in terms of shooting numbers. Hold up. Continue.
Look that up for me, but I felt that insane because it's this team is full of players who it's you wouldn't expect. There's multiple options on this team, and you don't really get that on a lot of other teams. It's usually you would think, oh, it's Wemby and Castle, your 2 options. But no, this team, you have many options even on the bench, and I think that the depth and the consistency of this team is what has got them here.
Yeah. He went 6 for 10, 60% from 3 in that game against the Thunder. So, insane numbers for Julian Champagnie. Sergio, what do you think about the Spurs playoff run?
I think the Spurs, they're just getting contributions from everyone. Everyone's contributing. Wemby is obviously, at the forefront of that. But, there's guys coming off the bench. In Game 1, De'Aaron Fox was hurt, so I believe Harper had to step into the starting lineup. And he played really well. He stepped up to the moment.
Yeah, Game 1 and 2.
Yeah, Game 1 and 2. So, guys are stepping up when they have to. They know their role. They know what they have to do to win. And, above all else, they just have heart. You saw the team's reaction when they won. Everyone was especially Wemby, they just want it more. They just, means something else to them. So, they show that on the court as well. So.
Yeah, and I think that it's been so impressive to see this team kind of knock out all these narratives that they're too young, they don't have enough experience, and they're kind of just, shoving that aside. And if they go on to win this championship, I think we kind of have to re-understand what experience is in the playoffs and how much it truly affects teams. Is this an anomaly for that kind of perspective, or is this a general trend that we're going to see over the next couple of years? I wanted to ask you guys this. What's an X-factor player, maybe not like a Jalen Brunson or Victor Wembanyama, but a guy that's going to be behind those guys that you think can really sway this series? And let's go with one in for each team. Let's start with Sergio.
I think for the Knicks, it's gonna be a guy like OG Anunoby. I mean, he's
Hmm.
played defense really well. He can score when he needs to. I think he's been an unsung, hero for them in my opinion. And he can come through when it matters the most. There is a moment, I can't remember what it was, but there was a moment where, he stepped up big and it like kind of made the difference in the game. And then same thing on the Knicks,
Yeah.
Josh Hart too. Like he's another guy that can
Hmm.
make a difference.
Daniel?
So for me, I was gonna take Cat. I think Cat's just overall, you know, it's just I forget the word, but basically two-way, being his defense as well as
Yeah.
being able to contribute on
Hmm.
offense. I just think that Cat has been the addition that this Knicks team needed for a little while. I know that trade was it 2 years ago, a year ago, but I feel
Hmm.
like it's finally paying off for what they had hoped for. And just it makes me a bit sad he couldn't have done this in Minnesota. But the fact that he's in this position to win a chip, I want Big Purr. I love Big Purr.
Yeah. All right.
And then
Um.
for
Oh yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
Spurs,
Go ahead with your Spurs player.
Spurs, I really think it's Stephon Castle. I think
Hmm.
Castle is just this option behind Wemby that helps tie this team together a lot. I
Yeah.
I would just mainly his offense really like just the way he's able to be that second option behind Wemby and still get these buckets that you might not get it with no one else, but Castle's always going to be there.
Yeah. Castle. I think that it's a very interesting matchup because he is a very aggressive downhill style of point guard that can get to the hoop and do really good in under the rim. And he might be matched up against. We don't know if it'll be Jalen Brunson, but I think that if whoever the guard is, all these guards and forwards are really good downhill. Jalen Brunson being the matchup that they could possibly exploit on the defensive side of the ball is going to be an interesting thing for the Spurs. I think if the Spurs can find that matchup and be successful in that, that's kind of like that kind of key to unlock this team because once you get downhill on these guys, Wemby's going to have more opportunities on these lobs and you might see, the efficiency of the Spurs continue to grow. Let's go with one player for me. I'm gonna go with for the Knicks. I'm gonna go with Mitchell Robinson. I think Mitchell Robinson had a little bit of an injury scare going out of the Eastern Conference Finals, which supposedly was like a non-basketball injury. I can only come and speculate what that non-basketball injury could be. You think he punched something?
I punched the wall. He had to punch the wall.
I was thinking he like closed a door of a car on his hand or something like that. That's what I was thinking. But I mean, Mitchell Robinson has been kind of like the rebounding and defensive guy for this team against these bigs. He matched up really well against Jared Allen and uh, Evan Mobley in that Cavs series. And I think that if they want success in defending Victor Wembanyama, it's going to have to be through, Mitchell Robinson. Obviously, Cat as well. But I think Mitchell is going to have a little bit more of a responsibility in also getting the boards on Wemby. I think that Victor, when he's on the glass and he's really good at getting rebounds, it's really difficult to get leads on this team. And I think if Mitchell Robinson can kind of like sway Wemby away from the rim a little bit with his size and his strength, I would say, then I think that it could allow for some second chance points that I think the Spurs have given up, especially in that Thunder series. And for the Spurs, I'm going to go with Dylan Harper. This is a guy that has been coming off of the bench. Obviously, he did start in lieu of De'Aaron Fox being out in those first two games against the Thunder. But I think that he has a little bit of Jalen Brunson in him for me. I think he's starting to become really good at being that small guard that can really spark a change for your team. And obviously he's just in year one, which is still crazy to me that he's playing with the poise that he's playing with. But he allows this team to have another option at the guard position that can really hurt you going downhill. And we can see that the jump shot is starting to come along for him. He's had a couple of great performances. I thought his performance in Game 7 against the Thunder was really good. He had a really good performance in one of the games against the Blazers. I think it was Game 3 in that comeback win. And I think that kind of has really sparked the ascension of this duo that is Dylan Harper and Stephon Castle to kind of grow into, something that is going to be a problem for NBA defenses as we continue into the next couple of years. All right, the last thing that we're going to talk about is, because the series is starting tomorrow, let's go around the horn and let's talk about our prediction for this series. Sergio, let's start with you. Who do you think is going to win this series and in how many games? And what do you think is going to be the reason that they win the series?
All right, so I've got the Spurs in 7. I just feel like the Knicks are going to give them the Spurs a little bit more trouble than I think a lot of people are expecting. They're hot right now. They're coming off of 2 sweeps. They're coming off of a lot of rest. To connect it back to baseball, this kind of reminds me of, I think it was the 2019 World Series, the Astros and the Nationals. The Knicks kind of feel like the Nationals at this point, because the Astros already, by that point, were huge juggernauts. Everyone in the ALCS and the NLCS, it was the Yankees and the Astros, and then everyone's like, oh, who's going to get swept by the Yankees and that, or the Astros, whoever comes out of that series. And then it went to 7 games, and the Nationals came out on top. So I would not sleep on the Knicks. I also kind of want to see the city get destroyed anyway, either way.
Turn it to Gotham.
Yeah, I want to see a Batman come out of this finals one way or another. But I still think the Spurs. Yes. I think Victor Wembanyama is going to be too much for Cat to handle. I think he's going to need help like every play. Like, he scared away Chet Holmgren, and I mean we know that Chet doesn't really have that dog in him. But
I mean, is that really saying much now? Like, dude, Chet Holmgren. That's a whole other can of worms. That was one of the worst Game 7 performances of all time.
Yeah. So we know Wemby can put the fear into someone, and I think he can put the fear into this entire Knicks team. I think it'll just be too much for them to handle, especially with all their depth and all their contributions they're getting off the bench. I think the Spurs will come out on top.
Okay. Daniel?
First off, I don't know why you would bring up the 2019 ALCS. But anyways...
He still has scars from his Yankees choking another one.
Lord.
It's all good. They were banging trash cans.
Yeah.
Anyways,
were they banging trash cans at that point?
Yeah, they were.
They were still banging
cheating,
trash cans,
but they weren't banging trash cans, but they were still cheating.
Yeah, that's what it was.
The buzzer allegations.
So I personally took Knicks in 6. It has a nice ring to it. But I think overall, like Sergio said, this Knicks team is hot. But the one other thing they know how to do well is rest. Because throughout those other series, I mean, you had 2 sweeps and then a series that went to 6. And they've had a lot of rest having to prepare for their next series. I think that's something that this team has just dealt with well. They know how to rest their players and come right back. And coming in, I think the Spurs team is just a bit exhausted. They went through the gauntlet playing the Thunder, going to 7. It was absolute, it took a little bit of a strain on them. And I think the Knicks can take advantage of that for first, maybe even second games, get 2 there. I think I could see them going 1 apiece, in San Antonio. But going back to New York, I think the Knicks take those 2 games. And I think that's where the script flips, going back to San Antonio, taking 1, and just going back, winning it in 6.
I could definitely see that happen, for sure.
But I really think this series can go either way, though. I think the series can go to 7, too. That's how good both these teams are. And I think Cat and Mitchell Robinson are the way to stopping Wemby. I think 2 bigs, rotating off him, that's exactly what you need to stop him.
I mean, yeah, the Thunder try with Chet and Hartenstein, and I could honestly argue that, in their peak, they're probably, I think, at the same level, if not better, than the duo of Cat and Mitchell Robinson. But obviously, playoff Chet is a whole different animal. Maybe not in the positive way, but I, being the resident Spurs fan here, hopefully my bias has not shown throughout this entire conversation. Oh, somehow Sergio's recording stopped, so we will. Well, I still see your face, but whatever. We'll ask him to come back on. But what were we just talking? Oh yeah, my prediction for the NBA Finals. I think that, without me being too biased about being a Spurs fan, I think that the Spurs just present a different issue for the Knicks that they have not shown this in this playoff run, and I think that is elite playmaking guards that can match with some 3-point shooting forwards. Just a more complete team than they've seen in this entire playoff run. I think that with the Spurs having being battle tested as well, I think that is a big thing with this team. And I think in all reality, the Knicks really haven't been as battle tested against the competition that they faced. I mean, they haven't faced the top 2 seed this entire playoffs, right? And I think that's gonna come into play here. I think the Spurs will probably have the advantage. I thought for a second that maybe with the Spurs having such an emotional win over the Thunder, that they would come out flat in the first game of the series against the Knicks, and it would probably go more along what you said, where they'll probably lose game 1. But I think there's been enough of a break now between game 7 of the Western Conference Finals and game 1 of the NBA Finals that I think I'm more confident that the Spurs can win game 1 than I was a couple days ago, right? And so I think that they're going to win both games at home. I think they'll split on the road, and I think that the Knicks will probably. Well, I guess, yeah. If I'm saying Spurs in 6, I guess they lose game 5 at home, and then they win game 6 on the road. That's kind of what I'm predicting. I think the Spurs win in 6. I think those guards, that perimeter defense, really hampers the playmaking ability of Jalen Brunson, and I think in turn also hinders the playmaking ability of there he is. He's back. Hinders the playmaking ability of Jalen Brunson and also those 3-point shooters. And I think that the 3-point shooting of the Spurs kind of catapults them to the NBA Finals win. And I think the Spurs end it in 6, which I think all in all, for this playoff run, I think they have been the best team in the playoffs. I know the Knicks will have a say in that, but I think if they were to win in 6, I think that just kind of caps off one of the greatest playoff runs that we've seen. Maybe not in the modern generation, maybe not in terms of the opponents, but I think for what the preseason expectations were for the Spurs, even me, I was happy with a 5 seed going into this year as a Spurs fan. And now we're sitting in the NBA Finals. And so I think for the expectations to be where they were going into this season, I think that the Spurs winning the championship, I think it will just go, be right at the end of the year. And I think this series is really going to show us the clash of, one, rust versus rest. Rust versus having a tough opponent in Game 7, right? I guess that is rust versus rest. What am I talking about? And also high-level opponents playing long series in the conference phase versus a team like the Knicks who have just boat raced everybody. They have a lot of rest, and they don't really necessarily have any issues. I think this is going to be an interesting series in that aspect. Spurs in 6. So Sergio's going Spurs in 6. I'm going Spurs in 6. Daniel is going with Knicks in 6.